Chad then produces the information that Sydney is like one of the top 5 cities on the planet in terms of like the industry of like CGI.
Something cool to know here that I didn't know.
That it's like the Silicon Valley of CGI almost.
They'll actually put up like a big green screen curtain to cover downtown Sydney right near this island and use that for like major things.
So basically all over Sydney are like post-production like warehouse like production companies. Post-production companies. Like it's a big place. A lot of like major Hollywood movies will send stuff to Sydney because there's just so much CGI action going on in Sydney. So Craig, who lives in Sydney, is like, I don't have access to anybody. And then Chad's like, well, I'm kind of bummed that you said that because you kind of live in like one of the top cities on the planet to get access. How could you not know somebody that with access to CGI? The other thing is the West Sydney Paranormal Research Team, I guess they have some web videos on their website. When they do their ghost hunts, they'll turn them into web videos. And in the beginning, the opening credits for these web videos, but it's not CGI. It's just freaking graphic effects and After Effects. But anyways, Chad notices that there's some what he calls CGI in these opening credits, and is like, why did you say you don't have access to anything and you're incapable of doing CGI when I look at your web videos and there's CGI in your web videos? Now, just because you live, like, I live in Pittsburgh.
That doesn't mean that I know NFL football players.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, exactly. Like, the Steelers are huge here, but I don't know any Steelers personally. I don't have access to any steel.
I've never met one of the Permane brothers.
Exactly. So that's that. And then what's in the graphics of the opening segments is just an After Effects text template. It's basically just like a ink splash with text on it. So like when they put their names up on the screen, it comes up in kind of like a neat animated fashion that has some motion tracking involved. But it's just a free download that they downloaded and put in After Effects and typed up some graphics. It's not CGI. And for Chad to get hung up on that really kind of just irritated me.
And it's not even that impressive.
No, it actually isn't really impressive because like you can see it like there's some motion tracking, but it's not perfect. I mean,
I could do that on a Mac.
If we gave Matt the software and equipment, he has no knowledge of editing video, but he in one day he could do it. Like this isn't. But anyways, like, but when you see the Sir No Face, for Chad to get hung up on this and make the leap to like, oh, someone that could do this text clearly is potentially capable of CGIing this Sir No Face thing. Like, no way in hell.
It would not. You could give me a computer, and in 6 hours, I could recreate their trailer or their video introduction.
But in 3 lifetimes.
But in 5 years, with all the appropriate training, I could not create that Sir No Face.
Right.
Now,
why don't you take us, Matt, to the thoughts of the actual CGI expert. So finally, Chad, we're in L.A., witnessing a conversation between Chad and his neighbor, who is this Hollywood CGI expert.
Right. So he brings it to his neighbor, who's the Hollywood CGI expert, and he automatically dismisses it as this is not. I couldn't recreate this, and I personally have issue with that because the first take is, I guarantee he could recreate that. I mean, I've seen some of the stuff that CGI has done in movies. That could have been recreated because I've seen things with much greater detail. The second thing he does is he decides he's going to take and try to recreate Sir No Face himself. And I think Chad even says, like, by the end of the week, he gave me this. And in my mind, I'm sitting there going, yeah, he spent a week to half-ass this thing. And it wasn't close. I mean, he's absolutely right. You put those two things side by side. And this one CGI that this guy created was shit compared to what the Sir No Face footage actually looked like. But it was also only done in a week. And I'm sure this guy had other projects he was working on. So I don't think that the fact that this famous CGI guy couldn't replicate it is proof that it couldn't be replicated. But, now, I do trust that somebody who has far more experience in CGI, like this guy doesn't...
But what did he ultimately say, though? But he also had a point. Even though he tried to replicate it, but he was looking at that footage, and then Chad, the main question is, I want you to look at this footage and tell me, is there any evidence that this was CGI? So he's doing two things. Could you CGI it?
Right.
But then look at this footage and tell me, is there any evidence that it was CGI? And he basically says...
He did say that there was no evidence of CGI.
Exactly. That's the important takeaway.
It is, but it is. But again, I'm going to come at this from a perspective of everybody involved is lying to me.
That's
okay.
right, yeah.
So I have no reason to believe that this guy's telling me the truth, but I can say this, if that's the case, then I believe nothing that any expert tells me about anything.
But also, this guy is putting his Hollywood credibility on the line, too. So, you can't ignore that.
That's what I was about to say. I don't believe the politicians are telling me the truth either, but after lying so many times, they just won't be politicians anymore.
Right.
And so I think that what Fred is saying is accurate there. In that this guy
can't just come out and say, he can't look at it and think that there might be some evidence it's CGI, but then just be like, well, I'm going to help my neighbor out.
I mean, he
needs me to say that there's no evidence of CGI, so I'll just say that. Because if it can be proven by somebody else in Hollywood that it was CGI, this guy looks pretty dumb.
So we'll do the math here. The Oaks Theater seats 400 people, roughly. Okay, this is going to 17 cities around the United States. I've seen on Facebook some of the other theaters they're going to. They're about the same size. So why would this famous CGI guy lie for something 4,000, 5,000 people are going to see and put his reputation on the line for something that potentially millions of people could see? And so I agree with Fred there that he's not going to lie for the sake of helping his buddy because there's a lot more on the line to lie and not be able to do the next Transformers movie as a result.
There's one other layer in this conversation which I was reminded of today. I was watching some online video about Sir No-Face. And Chad mentions in a radio interview about how he takes his footage to this CGI expert neighbor. In order to do CGI, you have to be basically an expert in motion mechanics of how human beings move. You can't animate a fake human being moving. If it doesn't look real, the brain picks up on that. So if he puts a person in a movie, like a CGI person in a movie, and it's not moving in a motion mechanic way that doesn't look like a human, it's not going to look real.
And that was the first thing that stuck out to you and I about Sir No-Face, is that this thing doesn't look real.
Okay, so exactly. So the first thing, before the guy even analyzed it, before the CGI expert even looked at it,
the first 2 seconds of seeing this,
he looks at it and goes, that thing doesn't move like a human. His first reaction is, that's not a human.
Which is the same reaction that Fred and I both had the first time.
Which also then just, again, reinforcing it's one of three things. It's real, it's a human, or it's a fake. So it's just adding to the layer of it's not human in that camp, which I don't think it is. I think it's obvious. Well, it could be, but boy, I mean, for someone, they'd have to get in like a little suit. But the thing is, it doesn't move like it does not move like a human. And a guy who's literally an expert in motion, like the mechanics of how a human moves in order to replicate it for a computer, notices that instantly. So I just want to throw that out there because it's very important.
So there's no reason to think that there isn't a fourth possibility.
And the fourth possibility would be a dummy prosthetic doll, that type of thing. That's option 4, which never gets mentioned in the movie.
No. And it's something that I think is worth pointing out here. And I know they said there's no room.
See, we asked this in the Q&A.
Yeah, this was asked in the Q&A. How do we know it wasn't just a person standing there tilting the dummy, right, on a stick, which would have caused the arm to move lifelessly and all these other things that they had pointed out? Their response to that is probably the thing that bothered me the most.
Because we have to take... it's not so much the response, but it's the fact that we have to take their word on it.
And I'm not going to do that.
Right.
Because ultimately, he's not going to sell tickets if everybody leaves there.
What they're ultimately saying is that the closet space was not big enough for a person to be... If a person stands in the closet, they couldn't hide around the corner, let alone stand around the corner with a dummy and hold it out and not be seen. They're basically saying that the space was too small for a person to be in. So if a person was standing there, you'd see the person.
So I take 2 issues with that. One is they say that they tried to replicate this. And the person that they used to play Sir No-Face in this example
huge dude.
Was Craig Powell.
Who's huge.
And he's huge. I mean, he is basically the size of Chad Calek. And if you look him up on Google, they're big guys. They're big guys. They're offensive, defensive lineman looking guys. Yeah, maybe they couldn't fit there, but could somebody like Fred fit there? or perhaps Craig's wife, who's a much smaller, much more petite person. The other thing I'm going to say is this, and this question was asked as well in the
petite,
Q&A.
But go ahead.
Huh?
She wasn't petite, but go ahead.
Well, she's small enough. Smaller than Craig.
Smaller. I'll give you that.
So this question was asked, and the other question was asked, Craig, did you ever go there? And very conveniently...
Chad, did you ever go
there? Chad, did you ever go there? The Chad Calek. And very conveniently, literally 1 week after he decided to take on this documentary, the government of Australia closed off the island to anybody. So
Chad got to go to the island, but he couldn't go in the building. He was on the island because he was standing there. Chad was on the island. But there's a lot of people on the island. They couldn't get access in the building. So when they were there, Chad never went in the room.
So I'm supposed to... So here's where I'm coming from on this. I'm supposed to believe, one, Chad... who, let's face it, as much as he's a respectable guy, does great films, he's
selling tickets.
That's his livelihood, is to sell tickets.
That's my point.
This isn't a ghost, doesn't sell tickets. Two, even if Chad truly believes this is real, now we're trusting that Craig is telling us the truth.
Right.
Who wasn't there. Now, I'm sure he had been in the... Well, I know he had been in the building because he...
Yeah, he did the recreation.
He did the recreation, but how do we know that Chad's telling the truth? So the person who we asked this question of...
We're trying to debunk Craig, and Craig's telling Chad, oh, no one... It's too small for anyone to be around the corner.
And then
Chad never gets inside, and then Chad basically just tells us that that's the answer. So that's the hole.
So that's the first hole that I have. The second hole is, as goofy as my video was that I actually sent to Fred, one day at work, I actually replicated this with about 6 inches of a corner between me, and I could get at a certain angle where I could peer my head around and be completely hidden. Okay, so I don't buy that there's not enough space if you use the right angles for how the person stands. So even if there isn't enough space, and I could go into that building and prove there's only 2 feet of space, I bet I could find somebody who could squeeze themselves in there and hold a prosthetic doll.
So here's one of the interesting things. Let's do this, and I think it's time to move on. I think we went on enough of the journey. We hit all the important things of the journey. So let's start wrapping it up with this. Let's go through the 4 options and say why we think it could and could not be one of those options, and then at the end what we think it is. So we're leaving real for the end. So we'll start with human. Well, if it's human, CGI, dummy, and then finally at the end, real or fake. Okay?
Are we dismissing that it couldn't have been an alien?
We'll put alien in there too. We'll briefly mention that. So let's start with human. Why could it or could it not have been a human? I think there's no reason that they're saying it couldn't have been because the space wasn't big enough. We can't see that for ourselves, so to me it could have been. But at the end of the day, I truly believe, and I will stand firm, it did not move like a human. It did not have the body size of a human. It did not have the frame of a human. I don't think it was human. So, it did not move like a human. It moved. It didn't move like a human. That's me.
So I agree with that particular component. I do not. I throw the whole "there's not enough room" thing right out the window because there's zero evidence. I even wanted to just ask for just an architectural.
Could be true, but we're just going off. Yeah, we can't.
I'm skeptic. I'm coming at this from a skeptic. You got to prove to me that you're not lying.
You did not prove to us. Yeah,
you didn't prove to me there's not enough space. You did, however, prove to me that whatever that was not human. Just the movement of that. It was too Jello-like. It was too fluid. The only way that's human is if it's a cadaver that somebody's just dangling out there, which is option number 3 that we haven't gotten to yet.
So, Matt, off the fence, human, yes or no?
No.
I'm saying no. Okay. So the next thing let's move into CGI.
I know very little about CGI. I know that I know that I have to trust an expert on something because I do think that he has more of a risk lying than he does telling the truth. So CGI, I say no.
I think really the same thing. I have to look at it and be like, what? Unless this guy never wants to work in Hollywood again, he's not going to. I mean, he definitively said, I see no evidence of CGI. He's putting that out there. So if someone ends up proving that it was just CGI. And the other thing, you have to look at it if it was CGI. So if it was CGI, that means someone was paid to do it. So somewhere someone knows that it's CGI. It's on a computer somewhere. It could eventually get leaked. It blows this whole thing out of water. I But at the same time, like I don't think it was CGI. I mean, like why would they spend that much money? Because it all comes back to they did not approach like basically all this was footage like